The life story of Robert Downey Jr., extended version. Some stories are about success, some are about failure, but very few are about losing everything and still finding a way to rise again. Before the fame, before the $1,000,000,000 movies, before becoming a global icon, there was a man fighting a battle no one could win for him. His name is Robert Downey Jr. Born into Hollywood, surrounded by cameras and creativity, his life looked like a dream. But behind that dream was chaos, a childhood without boundaries, a world where rules didn't exist, and a path that led him somewhere dangerous. Long before he understood it, at an age when most children are still learning right from wrong, he was exposed to addiction, and that moment quietly shaped everything that followed. He had talent, real talent, the kind that cannot be taught, the kind that makes people stop and watch. From powerful performances in films like Chaplin to becoming one of the most promising actors of his generation, felt like nothing could stop him. But sometimes, the greatest threat comes from within. Fame grew, success grew, but so did something else, something darker, something stronger, something that slowly took control. The world watched as a rising star began to fall. Arrests, rehab, broken trust, and eventually, silence. Because Hollywood doesn't wait, it moves on. But this story doesn't end there, because from the lowest point, from the edge of losing everything, came a comeback no one believed was possible. From a man the industry had given up on, to the face of a global phenomenon in Iron Man. This is not just a comeback story. This is a story of redemption, of resilience, of proving that no matter how far you fall, you can rise again. This is the life story of Robert Downey Jr., born into Hollywood, but not into stability. Some people chase fame, but Robert Downey Jr. was born into it. On April 4, 1965, in New York City, he entered a world already surrounded by film, art, and creativity. His father, Robert Downey Sr., was an experimental filmmaker. His mother was an actress. Hollywood wasn't a dream, it was his reality. But behind the creativity, there was chaos, a lifestyle that didn't follow rules, a home where boundaries were unclear, and where adulthood came too early. Because sometimes, growing up in freedom means growing up without protection. A childhood interrupted exposure too soon. At an age when most children are discovering toys, Robert Downey Jr. was exposed to something far more dangerous. Addiction. At just 6 years old, he was introduced to drugs by his own father. Not out of cruelty, but out of a misguided sense of openness. But the impact was real, and it was deep, because when a child is exposed to something that powerful, it doesn't just pass, it stays. And for Robert, it became part of his story, a shadow that would follow him for years. Early talent, a star in the making. Despite the chaos, there was something undeniable. Talent, natural, effortless, magnetic. Robert began acting at a young age, appearing in his father's films, learning the craft not in classrooms, but on real sets. By the 1980s, he started gaining recognition. He became part of a group of young actors rising in Hollywood. Films like Less Than Zero showed his potential. In that film, he played a character struggling with addiction, and the performance felt too real, because it was. He wasn't just acting. He was reflecting parts of his own life, and Hollywood noticed. He was brilliant, but also unpredictable. Success meets addiction, a dangerous combination. As his career grew, so did his struggles. Fame brought opportunities, but it also brought pressure. And for someone already battling addiction, that pressure became fuel. His career reached a major high when he starred in Chaplin. His performance as Charlie Chaplin was extraordinary. So precise, so detailed, so powerful. He received an Academy Award nomination. At that moment, he had everything: recognition, respect, success. But behind the success, the addiction was growing stronger. The fall begins losing control. Then came the fall, slow at first, then suddenly, out of control. Arrests, legal issues, rehab attempts, relapses, again and again. Hollywood began to lose trust. Studios saw risk. Directors saw uncertainty. And slowly, the doors started closing. Robert Downey Jr. was no longer seen as just talented. He was seen as a problem, a liability, a star on the edge of destruction, rock bottom, when everything falls apart. There is a moment in some lives where everything collapses, not slowly, not quietly, but all at once. For Robert Downey Jr., that moment came in the late 1990s. Arrests became frequent. Court cases became normal. Rehabilitation attempts kept failing. The world watched as a rising star turned into a cautionary tale. At one point, he was sentenced to prison, not for a role, but in real life. The same man who once played legends on screen was now fighting to survive his own story. And in that darkness, there were no cameras, no applause, no script, just consequences. The long road back, fighting himself. Getting back up is not a moment. It's a process. Painful, slow, uncertain. After prison, Robert Downey Jr. tried to rebuild his life. But trust is not easily restored. Hollywood had moved on. Studios didn't want risk. Directors didn't want uncertainty. And his past followed him everywhere. He took small roles, faced rejection, again and again. But something had changed. This time, he was serious. About recovery. About discipline. About survival. And slowly, step by step, he began to rebuild. Not his career first, but himself. A risk that changed everything. Iron Man. Then came a moment that no one expected. A decision that seemed too risky, too uncertain, too dangerous. Marvel Studios cast Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark in Iron Man. At that time, it wasn't a safe choice. Studios were hesitant. Insurers were concerned. But Marvel saw something others didn't. They didn't just see an actor. They saw a story. Because Tony Stark was a man who lost control, hit rock bottom, and fought his way back, just like Robert. And when the film was released, everything changed. Iron Man wasn't just a success. It was a phenomenon. And Robert Downey Jr.? He wasn't just back. He was reborn, dominating the world, becoming Iron Man. After Iron Man, there was no stopping him. He became the face of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Films like The Avengers, Iron Man 2, Avengers Endgame, turned him into one of the biggest stars in the world. But this wasn't just about fame. This was about redemption. Every performance carried something deeper, a reminder of where he came from, of what he survived. And audiences felt it, because it was real. Legacy more than a comeback story. Today, Robert Downey Jr. is not just known as an actor. He is known as a symbol of second chances, of resilience, of transformation, from a child exposed too early, to a star consumed by addiction, to a man who lost everything and fought his way back to the top. His story is not perfect. It is not clean, but it is powerful, because it proves something most people forget, that no matter how far you fall, you are never too far to rise again.